Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefuehl and welcome to South Africa. We've come here to take a look at the brand new facelift of the Macan Turbo. 2014 feels like a lifetime ago, but unbelievably, that is when the Porsche Macan arrived on the market. Well, it's achieved an awful lot within a relatively short space of time. This then seems surprisingly early to be saying that it's coming to the end of an era. What do I mean by that? Well, this is the last facelift revision before the brand new model expected to be released sometime around about 2020-21. But that is going to be heavily influenced by a new electric platform. So this then, as the last version of the top of the line, full power internal combustion engine version, is something of the end of an era. Well, maybe not. Don't panic, there should be more combustion engines in the future, but I just don't know if they'll look and feel quite this way. So if you think, come on, facelift, I'm just gonna hold out and wait, there is rather a lot more happening with this car than only some minor aesthetic changes. Lots of things to look forward to and talk about. We have a new, more powerful, lighter engine, completely different brakes, different dynamic setup for the drive, but still, hopefully, everything you loved about the previous Macan Turbo. So, how does that manifest itself in terms of what's happened to the styling? Well, I think quite a lot has been done here in order to refresh and really re-energize this design. It starts off with a completely new front apron. Now, if you're familiar with the Macan, you'll know that it's somewhat understated. As Porsche's smallest SUV, they've tried to really go with a styling and elegant feel. When you want to produce the new top of the line, the Turbo, clearly it has to be a bit more punchy and dynamic, and that's been achieved right from the front. Take a look down here. Wow. Well, to me, this speaks of a massive amount of confidence either in fate and your encounters with stones when you're driving on the road, or just a pure statement that really, you don't mind, you're all about the drive. You have massive air intakes at either side on the front here, and that really visually adds up to a very bold appearance. It's always difficult getting the balance right in smaller SUVs because you want them to look aggressive, especially when they're sporty, but they're not big cars, so you can't overblow that style. For me and my taste, the balance here is just right. These large swooping lines right across the front really compress down that design and make it look angular, dynamic, stylish, athletic, and it really works well with these now full LED headlights that you get standard with the car. I'm really liking the way that everything's been tied together here. It makes the design look aggressive, but not too aggressive. Sporty, but not too sporty. It does promise an awful lot about the drive though. Will it deliver? Round to the side, you really can get a sense of just what makes this car so popular. When Porsche decided to enter the SUV market, a lot of people felt that it couldn't be done. The brand was synonymous with small, sporty, dynamic cars, everything you don't think of naturally when it comes to SUVs. But the reason that this has been so popular for the brand, I think, is because it's closest to managing to capture so much of that design aesthetic of the smaller cars in a more convenient, handy, larger package. So yes, you're going to get some compromises over space in terms of what you might expect from an SUV, but look at these design lines. And in this, the Turbo model, you have some nice extra features that really do help it to pop even that little bit extra. Now, everything, of course, is adaptable and changeable depending on your taste, but the features that we're looking at right here are a brand new color just for this car, and that's called Mambo Green. I like it. But if it's not quite your thing, there's also a fantastic blue. And if you like things a bit more understated, don't panic, there are still some nice grey colours to go with as well. But for me, if you're going to go with a Turbo, come on, you should make a little bit of noise about it. And I think this is carried off really nicely in a way that doesn't overblow the statement too much. So coming through to the front, the first thing you notice are these brand new wheels. Now, you can get this car standard with 20, but as we're looking at here, these are the 21-inch wheels. So a very large visual statement for the car. And in quite nice contrast with a fairly subtle character going throughout the design of the side. Just to give it a slightly more sporty feel, carbon elements down here lower on the door, matching mirrors up on top, and then pulling the whole design line right through to the back, these piano black trim details on the doors and windows. So, tying in the design, adding a little bit more flair and sportiness, it works for me, but what about you? One of the things you can get as an option on the Macan Turbo are these. These are Porsche surface coated brakes. Yet another acronym for you to remember. What you need to know is they are tungsten carbide coated. So on top of increasing their performance and shortening your stopping distance, they also promise up to 90% reduction in brake dust. So are they any good? Well, there's only one way to try that out. Round at the back, I'm pleased to say that not that much has been changed. Now, I've been absolutely fascinated to see the response to the rear of the Macan ever since it launched as a new facelift. Surprised by how much negative response there's been amongst people. I think this is a great redesign. I really, in particular, like the way that this lighting strip has been carried right through the back and wrapped round into the side. A mixture of roundness and angularity of design. I think works really well, but not everybody has gone on board with that. I hope that that means that over time, because it's new and a little different, it will be embraced as people get more and more used to the design. So for me, keeping the aesthetic of the original design as clean and unmessed around with really works for the rear of this car. This nice contrasting bit at the top, matching the styling of the overall flow of the back. I just really think the proportions work well here. The car looks svelte, stylish, dynamic. And of course, once you get down to the business end, really great finishing of the exhaust tailpipes here. But I'm well aware that this is an opinion splitter, and I'm really keen to know from the guys who weren't massive fans of this redesign when it launched, is it growing on you yet? Right from this piano black spoiler at the top, down through the design. Talking about that commitment to design lines that happens at the back of the car, I'm happy to tell you that the front is no exception. Just take a look at this. When you want to access the engine compartment on the Macan, the first thing you're going to notice is that means lifting up the entire front section of this car. Why? Well, that's because not only does that make engine access easier, but it also means these design lines that are in the bonnet are kept completely free of any interference from having separate elements to them. So when you open up the front, it really does tell you you're into something a little bit special. Look at that. One piece, solid body. That's really, really nicely done. Now, if Thomas has a slightly closer look at the engine, the very first thing you're going to see glaring at you is the 2.9 litre badge right on the top. Now, keen-eyed observers will be thinking, hang on a second, wasn't the previous one 3.6 litres? The answer is yes, it was. So this is 20% smaller as an engine, but what's really exciting is that it still manages to deliver 10% more power, 440 horsepower. That's a lot more than the predecessor, 550 Newton meters of torque. And of course, if you're going with the S Chrono, and why would you not? That's going to give you a 0 to 100 speed of just 4.3 seconds. Now, obviously, you're always going to find people who say, I'm never happy if I go down in size on an engine, but don't forget, that does make it more fuel efficient. Yes, it should also make it a little bit quieter, but it also reduces the weight of the vehicle. So you get more punch, more power, less weight, less fuel consumption. That should all add up to a slightly more satisfactory drive. But does it? Well, I'm really excited to find out. If you're thinking this all looks suspiciously familiar, you'd be right. We know this engine already from the Cayenne and the Panamera. So how have they managed to reduce the size but increase the power? Well, a big part of that is the central turbo layout. There are two exhaust turbos that are fitted into the V of the cylinders. That means the exhaust manifold in the cylinder heads can deal with the combustion process in a lot more efficient manner. So theoretically, smaller size, much more efficient use of resource, especially the management of the turbo process, and that means a lot more power. So we start with the key, and I have to tell you, I've always been a big fan of Porsche's keys. It's a really nice feature to be able to put your car keys down on a surface and know right from a glance exactly what they belong to. So this obviously mirrored for a miniature key-shaped 911 just makes me feel happy. It's nice and comfortable in the hand. It does its job. But of course, that's what it's there for, to allow you access into the Macan Turbo. And here we get our first glance of what the styling effect is like. So being a Porsche, I would say conservative and understated is how you can describe most of the styling, but it is a sporty car, and you can see that reflected here in the carbon trim. Now there are lots of different options to go for, so you will be able to find something that matches your style. For me, this is really the right balance between sporty and still conservative. I don't want an interior that screams at me, but at the end of the day, I did spend more as a hypothetical customer on having the top model, so I do want some nice design elements that just let me know that I have arrived. So plenty here that is very easy to recognize for standard Porsche users. The layout here, for example, of the mirrors and the windows and the adjustments, the nice solid door handle, everything is exactly as you expect it to be, which is one of the features I enjoy most about Porsche. Now you could say that's a bit of a drawback, that nothing screams at you for being different, but I think there's a lot to be said in just getting the design right once and then sticking with that. Now, talking about design features, take a look at this. This seat has 18 different adjustments that you can make to it. Would you describe that as overkill? Well, I think I just might. Well, a car review is just that. And car reviewers are a particular breed of species. So I have to tell you, what we like in a seat design more than anything else is something that is quick and simple to adjust. And that's a really important point, because an owner doesn't feel that way. If you have a car, it takes time to get used to it and find exactly what you like. Why am I saying all of that? Well, because I have to tell you, I haven't had nearly as much time as I might like to use these controls to find the perfect seat setup for me. Well, that's interesting, because at least it tells you that if you just jump in this car and want to drive it, you really still don't have to concern yourself with that. I've done very little playing around with these controls, but I still was able to find relatively quickly a very comfortable driving position within this seat. The steering wheel as well is electric, and as you can see, whilst compared with the manual one, it's not the fastest thing in the world to adjust. It is pleasingly precise, so finding your comfortable, correct driving position in this car is actually a lot quicker and easier than you might think, having looked at that overwhelming panel of choices that you have before you. So once you sit in the car, you're ready to drive, you haven't spent 3 hours setting it up correctly. You know what, I don't know for a fact, but I'm pretty certain you would really benefit from getting an expert to help you set up a seat like this and then never letting anybody adjust it if you got it. But don't forget, if you are sharing your car, they are memory seats nicely, which means that you can have it set precisely for more than one user at once. But if you just don't have the time, patience, or interest in any of that, and you just want to drive it, It's very straightforward. Now for me, I'm 5'10" or 178 centimeters, short legs, long torso. What does that mean? It means that you can look at the roof height that I have available and say that it's comparable with somebody 6 foot or even 6'1" in height. Plenty of space for me here. The key things, because of that long torso, that I always like to do immediately are drop the seat to as low within the car as I can get it. That maximizes my headroom, but it also decreases my center of gravity relative to the car, so it gives me the most sporty drive. That was quick, simple, and easy to do in this car, and having done it, I absolutely feel that I'm where I want to be. I'm right in the middle of this driving experience. The bonnet comes up nice and high, but not visually too high. Because of the size of the car, I feel very nicely enveloped within it and really ready to drive. And in a Porsche, I think that's what it should all be about. Having been a car reviewer for some time now, I can tell you that the thing that people dislike most is change. And the reason isn't because they're frightened of the new thing that's to come, it's just because people get used to liking what they like and they want it to stay the same. That for me is why this car is so important. Yes, it's just a facelift, it's not a radical revision, but I think it's the last time you're going to be seeing some of these features in a car like this. Now, if you haven't had the chance to check out our Taycan review, go and have a look. That is the future of Porsche. You can't argue that as much as some things won't change, that is the digital way in which things will be presented. This car, to me, is the last of a breed. And if this is your style, you really should think about jumping on board before it's gone. Just take a look at this. If you've seen the Taycan review, you will know how digital interaction with car systems is headed in the future. But for now, if you are an analog person living in a digital world, this is going to make you very, very happy. If you like buttons and knobs, you will be able to find something to adjust whatever it is you like. So there's nothing here that is unfamiliar to your standard Porsche driver. But what is somewhat unusual is just how much of this there is in the modern digital expression of the car's technology. Yes, there's a touchscreen, but ultimately, for people who are very used to mapping their own buttons in their mind, you are going to be able to make whatever adjustments you want in a very analog fashion. So from a stylistic point of view, to me, having recently reviewed the Taycan, it does feel a little dated, but I say that in the most affectionate way possible. I really like that for one last hurrah, this stuff is still here and still accessible. And you know what? It works simply and effectively. It just might be something of a challenge remembering quite where the button you wanted to press is actually located. When we talk about that combination of the digital and analog, nowhere is that better expressed than the car's infotainment and assistance systems displays. Now, it's quite unusual even for a modern car like this to actually still require for you to use the key. Again, that's a detail I quite like. And when we switch this car on, we immediately get a sense of what is being achieved here. Again, for a new car, it's very unusual now to have so many analog elements featured within the design. I think that is a very conscious decision on the part of Porsche. They really want to celebrate what's gone before and I guess try and help to prepare their customers for what's coming next. I like this mix, but it's surprising how quickly this has become to look dated within its modern environment. I suspect over time, features like this will become design classics as you simply won't be able to get them anymore on cars. But for now, we have two analog dials. These are very well road tested, so they display the information crisply, cleanly, directly. But there's a very sensitive and nice application of a digital display in the third dial here. Now, that's controlled by the steering wheel, and I have to tell you, it's really straightforward to switch between displays so you can get exactly the information you want. Now, all of that's been paired by this. This is an 11-inch touchscreen in the middle. Well, you know what? It's not a bad system. It's not the most responsive you've ever used, but it's actually pretty pleasing. And the controls, as you can see, do have some proximity sensitivity as well. I'm not showing you that right now, but that means that it does unclutter the screen for you and make it a lot simpler to only visually access exactly what you're looking for. There are a couple, there we are, we can see how that works. That's the proximity sensor. There are a couple of minor bugbears that I would tell you about. Obviously, when you're in the process of migrating from an analog to a digital system, some things are going to get left by the wayside. I couldn't get anyone to give me a satisfactory answer why, for example, it is that if I'm using my navigation and I'm listening to music at the same time and I want to fast forward a track, it simply isn't possible to do that without selecting media. You can either do that via the screen, or don't worry, there's a standard button for that below, and then you have to press the fast forward button. Now, I don't know why there couldn't be a button for that on the steering wheel, but there isn't. It's a minor niggle, but again, as things progress into the fully digital, it's just something that you don't expect and won't have to deal with in future. That aside, the system works very cleanly. The menu system is very straightforward once you get used to it. And I did really enjoy this mix of being able to pick options on this menu or just stab at them using their traditional buttons while I'm driving, because ultimately that's what I want from system interaction. It should be clean, simple, and straightforward. So I'm spending my time concentrating on what I'm enjoying most, which is the drive. Having just said all of that, I'm now going to go ahead and contradict myself slightly. Of all of the steering wheels that I use, this is one of my absolute favorites. Now, I know that it's an opinion splitter having this microfiber cover on the steering wheel, but for me, it makes it feel really special. It's not unique to this car. It's on several other Porsches, but I really like it. Now, I think this is important to mention. Look at this. I have tiny, odd hobbit hands. And the result of that is that I like the way this wheel feels when I hold it. If you have large hands, you might find that this feels a little bit too small for you. It's perfect for me. The radius is great, the structure is really nice, but most important, it delivers a very impressive amount of solidity and good design feel when you use it. It really feels intentional, and that's only going to help you when it comes to making nice, sporty driving choices with the steering. Now, all that aside, here comes the contradiction. I know I said I wanted some extra audio options, but I do like the way that the steering wheel has been stripped down to the cleanest, simplest presentation that it can have. The focus is all on the drive. So when you put your hands on the wheel and you feel these gear shifters, they are so nicely delivered. There are so many manufacturers that now feature a version of this on their steering wheels, and usually in one way or another, or too often, they're disappointing. They don't feel quite right. To me, this is a masterclass in exactly how you pair this technology with a steering wheel to make it feel immensely satisfying. All of the controls work in exactly that way. As you can see, they are clean, simple, and stripped down. Now, before I get 1,000 comments explaining this to me, yes, I do know that this button right here is mappable. That means I could make it my fast forward button for the stereo. But that's not really going to help me with rewind and pause, you know, the standard stuff that you generally want to do. And in any case, I agree with Porsche. I don't need that stuff cluttering up my steering wheel, but as they already decided I could have 1,000 buttons on the central console, why not just give me a couple there? I'm niggling about small things. Overall, as a package, this works fantastically well. And I really like the drive mode selector down here. It's perfectly placed, really ergonomic to use. And as I hope we'll see when we're driving a little bit later, when you find that overtaking opportunity and you just want to kick it up a couple of notches, it is so satisfying to reach down and just give that a quick flick. And then after you've completed, just send it right back. Really, for me, this is just about as good as it gets. But that could be a controversial opinion. Tell me, what do you think? Now, if you haven't picked up by now quite what an obsession to design Porsche have, the best way I can illustrate you is a trick that Thomas just showed me. If you look through the options list for this car, you will see that it can come with a heated steering wheel, as in fact this car has fitted to it. But where, oh where, can you switch it on? Well, I have to tell you, if Thomas hadn't told me this, I would never ever have figured it out. The button is right here underneath this central spoke. Why? Well, because when they were done with this design, they absolutely didn't want to add anything visually to it at all. So it's tucked away right underneath here. Subtle, discreet, functional, perfect. Coming down from the 11-inch screen, you can see a fairly standard affair of layout down here. Interesting, we visually reference what is to come in future Porsche design here with this chrome central part to the grille as we move away from manual controls and electronic design of the future. And now we come to my favorite feature of the interior, I think paired perfectly with the steering wheel. I really don't understand why so many manufacturers get this wrong when the solution is in front of them. There are two features of your experience as a driver that must be prioritized. First and most importantly, the steering wheel. Secondly, because although in an automatic you won't be touching it all the time, the gear stick. In a sports car, it has to feel solid, satisfying, well designed, and really good in your hand. This for me is absolutely spot on. I love the way it looks, I love the way it feels, and when you pull it down to engage drive and off you go, it just feels great. And it looks pretty good within its context as well. But I am particularly keen for any viewers that have larger hands to tell me what their experience of this stuff is. As I already said, I do have particularly small hands, and so all of this stuff feels great to me, but I'm not sure if it would work as well for you if you do have larger hands. So please let us know in the comments if that is your experience. Minor quibble about this design of the dashboard, well, there is nowhere blindingly obvious for me to park a mobile phone while I'm driving. So where exactly is that going to go? The answer is to be found in this central console. So the idea here again is to keep clutter and anything visually distracting well out of your way as a driver. New for this car in particular, we have this inductive charging section here, which means you can clip your phone in. And as Porsche explained to you nicely, the screen should face out. And I think you can see on the screen there, it instantly connects really very effortlessly. Now I think Thomas has gone with the smaller, cheaper iPhone here. So what I don't know is if the larger, more expensive one would fit. Obviously, as we go through different phones, they get bigger and bigger, but I can tell you that there is about a spare. This is an iPhone 11, right, Thomas?
It's an 11 Pro, yeah.
Oh, 11 Pro, of course it is. Now, I think I can tell you there's about a spare ½ centimeter at the back of this, so there is a little bit of progression room here if you want to get bigger. But you know what? Come on, it's a car, not phone storage, so I think that this is more than adequate. I think this is a really nice design detail. There are two USB-C connection points here. There's also a SIM slot to make your car active itself, and of course a standard SD. All simple, easy to access and straightforward. The downsides, well, because all of the tech is sitting in here, obviously you're not going to want to keep too much rubbish in that, or it will affect your ability to be able to use this for the space it's intended. So, has the glove box left us any room to keep our clutter? I'm now going to ask Thomas to perform a yoga move in order to move. Oh, beautiful, Thomas, perfect. If we look inside here, well, I think that's more than sufficient. Honestly, everything about the design of this car tells me that what I want is clean and free of clutter. And I kind of think that Porsche are helping me to achieve that, but not so much. Obviously, I still have space to put the things that are important to me. So that's the front of the car, where style and driver's experience went out slightly over practicality. So how about the rear? Well, you know, let's be fair. This is a compact SUV, so I would expect in the back to be a little bit of a forgotten space, because honestly, most people who are driving this car, I think, are going to be planning on 2 passengers and luggage. So those are the spaces that have been prioritized. But the rear seat passenger hasn't been forgotten by any stretch of the imagination. Again, I'm 5'10" or 178 centimeters. I have just enough headroom back here to be comfortable. So I would say if your rear seat passengers are anywhere up to 6 foot, it's going to be fine. The car is actually very comfortable for 4. Realistically, if you want to take a 5th person, it is wholly possible, but I don't think they're going to want to travel too far like this. So you can seat 5 if all you're doing is popping out around town or picking up friends to go out. Fine, you can take 5, but for comfort and traveling the way it's intended, 4 people is perfect for this car. Now, I do have particularly short legs, and the driver's seat is set for me. So when you look, bear in mind that that's what we're talking about, but having done an awful lot of similar experiments in other cars, I can tell you there is a very pleasing amount of legroom back here. all in all, the back experience is a lot more comfortable and nicely thought through than I would have expected. I could really enjoy being back here, and I particularly like these 2 charge points they have for rear seat passengers, your own heating and cooling, and the styling is mirrored from the front. So it really is a lot more pleasant back here than you might be expecting. From a practicality standpoint, if you do have 2 rear seat passengers back here, they can travel in comfort. But if more commonly you don't, but you need to transport things that are just a little bit larger, well, the seats break down in 3 separate parts. So you can see larger items will go straight through the middle without needing to sacrifice either one of your rear seats. But if you do have something that's significantly bigger and you need to get more access at the rear, well, given that it's a compact SUV, I'm really happy to see 0 ledge here. So things will just come straight through from the back. You have plenty of space. So when you are finally ready to drop your child off at university, you can take them and their stuff all at the same time. If this is the first time you've seen a review for the facelifted Macan, you won't yet have noticed this. This is the boot access. I really like that styling detail. You know, I'm gonna get Thomas to keep this shot while I close the boot again so we can take one more look. The reason I'm so enthusiastic about this is it just speaks to me of the quality of the design throughout this car. Because if you look at the rear, anywhere else that you could locate a boot catch would really spoil the aesthetic. It's so clean, it's so straightforward. And I bet they spent an awfully long time discussing exactly where and how they would mount this. This is such an elegant solution, but best of all, because of its location, it's not going to get covered in dirt and muck. So honestly, if you're a bit like me and you don't wash your car quite as much as you should, it's just not going to be a problem. Now, once you open it up, you get to see the space that you have inside. Well, come on, it's a Macan, so you weren't expecting a cave back here. But honestly, I think this is more than enough room for 99% of anything you could ever realistically want to transport in this car. The load height is great, very easy to get things in here, plenty of room back here, even for a suite of suitcases, and lots of nice little extra storage areas tucked away beneath and elsewhere within the back. So, overall, look, if your primary concern is that you need a large amount of space, you're not going to be looking at a Macan anyway. But I think what I want to reassure you is, if you're worried that this will provide you with enough room for day-to-day use, I think we can all agree that it will. %20 smaller, but 10% more power. That gives this car a 0 to 100 kilometers per hour time of 4.3 seconds. Now that's because this has the sports chrono pack. So if you go with the standard one, that's 4.5 seconds, but either way, it's still going to be quicker than its predecessor, lighter and more efficient. Top speed of 270 kilometers per hour. That's an increase on the predecessor, and overall the package should be leaner, tighter and more dynamic. Well, we're just on the outskirts of Stellenbosch at the moment, so I can't really open up the car yet and show you what it delivers, but it does give me an excellent opportunity to talk about the driving experience. As you would expect if you've ever driven a Macan before, the seating position in this car is excellent. It delivers the same visceral thrill of sitting down in the lower down Porsche sports cars because the body is so high proportionate to your position within the car. You're low enough on the road to still feel dynamic, but it's quite nice, especially once you get round town, to have that elevated seating position, and I think that goes a long way to explaining just why this model has done so well for Porsche. All-around visibility is okay. I think in keeping with most compact SUVs, you'll be familiar with the way that the B-pillar interacts with the headrest to produce quite a significant blind spot. But the car is so small and you feel so comfortable within it that your overall awareness is a lot better than your initial experience of the visibility should suggest. So I wouldn't really have that as an off-putting feature if you live in a busy town with lots of pedestrians who don't necessarily always follow the rules. Okay, I already mentioned it at the start. but even around town, I absolutely love this steering wheel. Again, it could be because of the size of my hands and how well it works for me, but it delivers a really nice balance between compact, agile, precise, which is what I want from a sports car, and still nimble, fun, comfortable, easy to use once you get around town and the speed drops back a little bit. But let me tell you, where this car sings the most and is happiest is most definitely when you take advantage of everything that this new, smaller dynamic engine can deliver. And for that, we're gonna need just a little bit more space. The car that we're driving has the sports chrono pack on as well, and honestly, I can recommend if you want to buy the Macan, you should definitely go with that. Not only does it enhance your performance, but the overall experience of this car is really brought to life. Let me show you what I mean. That is 100% the best feature of this car. When you're driving it in traffic or around town, you have it in normal driving mode. It's polite, it's nippy, it's friendly. You really don't get any sense you don't want of exactly what you have lying under the bonnet. But when you find a bit of open road, put it into sports, and then let it sing. Oh, that is just lovely. Now, 4.3 seconds is not the fastest acceleration in the world, but for this car, it's perfect. Now, you might think that you can see the petrol dial whizzing round every time I put my foot down. I can tell you that the stated number for fuel efficiency for this vehicle is 9.8 litres. Well, as you would expect, that changes quite radically once you start using the accelerator, but not as much as you might think. In standard driving, sticking well within the speed limits, I averaged out at about 10.2 litres. If you really start having fun with this car and really getting the best out of the drive, you still shouldn't see much more than about 11. Now, that might seem a little heavy for a smaller car, but don't forget exactly what you're getting with it. If you're only driving it easily, it will deliver very close to the stated numbers. But if you want to have fun, and there's no reason for owning this car unless you do, it won't blow your mind with the increased fuel consumption, and that makes me really happy. Because truth to tell, the most fun you have with this car is not to be found in driving it everywhere like a crazy person. It's in driving it on nice, quiet roads like this, and every now and then you find something and you think, might be nice if I just went a little bit faster. And when you see the effortlessness with which the power is applied through this fantastic 7-speed PDK gearbox, you're going to be nothing other than smiling. We're now driving along right next to the South Atlantic, just south of Cape Town. And the roads here have some pretty specific speed restrictions. And apparently the police are very keen about enforcing them. So on one hand, it's a little sad that we can't drive these roads quite the way we'd like to, but on the other, it does give us the opportunity to see how the car behaves in normal driving situations. Well, first of all, let's talk about those brakes. I can't think of a time in which I've driven a car that had specific sports brakes that were so pleasingly delivered. They strike the balance between accuracy and precision with comfort and ease of use. This car is not trying to pretend to be a sports car, but it does deliver a very satisfying performance. Let me show you what I mean. If I give it a little bit more oomph, well, that's the turbo lag in normal mode, and then let's brake. Now, that was really gentle, precise braking. So unlike a sports car where you would expect much more immediacy in terms of how that impacts on your drive, in this car you get exactly what you ask for. So put your foot down hard, oh, the car will stop. But give it a little bit more gentle application, and it's very impressive how quickly the car comes to a stop from even significant speed. That adds to the driving experience so nicely, because the most fun you can have in this car is unquestionably overtaking, and being able to do that fast and safely feels really nice. So you're going to want to be doing lots of it, which is great. It's the fun element that you want in a compact SUV. Practicality with a little bit of excitement thrown in for good measure. Now, of course, we're going to need to talk about how that gearbox works within the equation. Well, if you're a familiar Porsche user, you will already know the 7-speed DSG PDK. It's great. There really is very little you can say about this to criticize it, and it works superbly well with the engine. What I will say is every now and then in standard mode, because that's delivered to give you the best balance of efficiency and a little bit of nippiness, you are going to be experiencing a bit more of that turbo lag. But this mode selector here is so easy to work with every single day while you're out driving that when you want to ignore that and just get the best out of the performance element and then switch back again, it's very, very straightforward and intuitive to do. So I think I'm going out on a bit of a limb here that this car is going to be able to do that rarest of things, and that's make all of its driver profiles happy. If you don't want all of that sporty driving, it's not shoved down your throat. You don't have to experience all of that power. You can just enjoy using this car as a town runabout. But if you're related to the person who owns this car, and every now and then you want to drive it without them being in it with you, oh, there's lots to enjoy here, especially if you're used to the standard Porsche sports car experience. It's really pleasing how much of that is still contained within such a small, useful package. So it's very easy to drive around in this, smiling all the time. The only question I have is, after you've driven one of these, will you realistically still be able to go for a smaller engine option? I don't think so. What do you think, Thomas?
I don't think so too.
Well, there you are. But don't take my word for it. Give it a try and let us know what you think. So we're going to need to have a quick conversation about sound. There is very little point in buying a Porsche unless it sounds like a Porsche. Now that's a problem in the modern world, because as engines become more efficient, naturally they make less noise. Now this engine is smaller and lighter than the predecessor, so that should have an impact on sound. Starting off in standard mode, I want to show you a little bit about what the standard acceleration and the standard sound experience is. So here we go. Cold start, foot down. Nice response, nothing to scare anyone. Good and steady. The turbos sound nice, but very controlled. So as you can hear, the cabin noise is really good. I'm not in any way being distracted by what's happening with the engine, but okay, that's for regular day-to-day driving. What happens when we put it in Sports Plus? Well, first thing that happens, as you may detect on the microphone, is the engine note has changed. So, a lot more satisfactory in the sound department. But I think you have to remember here, the most important point is that you're not going to be driving your car like this all the time. At least I hope you're not. So it's important that the car strikes the right balance between delivering what you want when you do put your foot down and the standard driving experience. Now, I know there are going to be a lot of people who say, come on, that just doesn't sound the way I expect a turbo to sound. But I think those people are traditionalists, and what they're talking about is their expectation of what they want from a turbo versus the reality of what a modern turbo system delivers. Yes, that's not true for all cars, but this is a compact SUV. So it might not be perfect for everyone, but being realistic and reasonable, I think for most people, that's still more than enough. Comfort and cabin noise in the Macan are both good. However, this car is fitted with 21-inch wheels. We didn't have the opportunity to try out the 20. I think from both the point of view of road noise and comfort overall, I would be very keen to try that as an option. Visually and aesthetically, I don't think you're dampening your experience too much by that extra inch. And I've got to tell you, comfort is always nice. But if what you want this car for is sporty, dynamic driving, well, I have to tell you, the 21 inches behave just fine. Well, that about brings us to the end of our adventure with the Macan Turbo here in South Africa. Now, before you go crazy and post a load of comments about how we could come to Cape Town, South Africa, and not show you many more of the beautiful mountain driving scenes that are available here, we have to tell you that we had the good fortune to land yesterday during this, and this. So we have never seen anything quite like that when it comes to filming driving. Unfortunately, that meant we had to wait until today, and we have a little limited time. We had to choose ocean or mountains. We couldn't really come here and not show you this, and it's the perfect setting for this car. Well, this is the top version of the Macan, so clearly that's not going to come to you cheaply. The entry price for this model is just shy of 92,000 euro. But when you start adding those options, obviously the price goes up. So is it worth it? Well, a lot of people who already own the extremely popular Macan are asking themselves, should I get this upgrade or should I wait for the fully new model? For me, that's actually a very simple question. It entirely depends on what you like. Are you somebody who enjoys driving as it has existed, or are you somebody who is excited and really driven by looking towards the future? Why? Well, a fully electric one of these will be available on the market within the next 2 years. So, unless you're the type of person who can afford to throw down on a brand new Porsche every 2 years, you may just want to hold off. But to me, this is a very special car. It is the last of its kind. As you enter the cabin and you still feel the contrast between the difference of analog and digital coming together, you still hear that internal combustion engine making that noise that you like. You're aware that we're coming to something of an end of an era. Because of that, I would say if you're looking to the Macan Turbo, you really should pull out all the stops and go for the best that's on offer here. Get the Sports Chrono package. Really enjoy what this car can deliver. But as I said, this is the end of an era, and it slightly feels like it. I love this car, but for me, it only makes me more excited and more enthusiastic to see just what Porsche can do with the fully electric model when it arrives to market. Now, I've spoken at length with Porsche about will there be more internal combustion engines. They were really hedging their bets when they answered, but my sense is whatever happens in the Macan future, there will always be an internal combustion engine available for the time being. But make no mistake, this is the last of these beasts to be designed first and foremost to drive with this platform. So if you are a petrol enthusiast, if you like buttons and dials and knobs, and you like to sit in a cockpit that tells you exactly how many revs you're doing in an analog way, buy this car. It is fantastic. The only criticisms I think you could have if you're a purist, does the sound deliver quite what you might like? Well, no, it's a little bit lacking, but to be honest, in any modern car, you're going to be finding that compromise more and more because, simply put, the engines are so efficient and so well designed, they just don't make that growly noise anymore. That's a time that's passed by. This car speaks not only to the past, but the future as well. So, in sum, if you want a compact SUV that is sporty, fun, dynamic, while still put a big grin on your face, and you just can't hold out to see what the electric one can deliver, then get this car. It is all kinds of great. But if, like me, you've had your expectations slightly ruined by driving the Taycan, you just might want to wait that little bit longer to find out if the future is ready to come to you. I hope you've enjoyed watching this clip. Please subscribe. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope we'll see you again soon.